Hello, Mandibil here. Welcome to my part 11 of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's book, The Art of the Argument, Western Civilization's Last Stand. And the last time I went over the chapter, the etymology of the argument. And first off, there was a mention of true or truth. And this is one of these very tricky ones, apparently. It's not tricky to me the way I understand my epistemology or my understanding of knowledge. That to me, true is very simple, but it doesn't say anything in itself. Truth is not something you experience or you can point to, or you could say this is the truth or something like that, right? True is a conclusion about a comparison between a proposition and your experience. And I point out that it's your experience. It's not necessarily your proposition, but it's your experience, right? If I say to you, that's an elephant, I don't have your experience, right? But you can have my proposition because you understand the reference in the proposition. So you can understand the proposition and understand what that reference is to, because the object is the elephant, which is the concept that you can experience exactly the same way I experience concept. You may not agree on the attributes like the color and the shape and so sort of, but the idea of elephant is identical, right? Because it's elephant. It's sort of artificial, you could say, right? Therefore, I can hand over my proposition to you, but I can't have the experience you have. You are comparing to that proposition, right? You want to figure out, or I might want to figure out whether or not you have the same experience, right? So if you say it's true when I say that's an elephant, well, then truth is a comparison between my statement, that's an elephant, and your experience, right? And if you want to find some agreement with me, you're saying that's true. If I say that's an elephant, you might be lying. I can't know that. That's up to me and your virtues or whatever my judgment is, right? Pure subjective, but it's still in the definition. It's a comparison between a proposition and your subjective experience. Either you experience the elephant or you don't experience the elephant. If you experience the elephant, the proposition is true, whether or not you say true or not, right? You might say it's false, even if you experience it to be true, right? So that's lying. But you know if the proposition is true to you. If I say that's an elephant and you experience elephant, the proposition is true to you, whether or not you express that truth or not. Okay. So truth is basically that comparison between a proposition and your experience. In order to determine, then he says here, the Socratic method is a way of probing abstract statements, particularly about morality, in order to determine if they hold true under most reasonable circumstances. Now, hold true, abstract probing is like, doing some science or what. The Socratic method is a way of probing if an abstract statement holds true. So it gets this convoluted layers that attempts or have the pretense of pretending to attempt to explain what truth is, while not going the full 9 yards, right? You're sort of just more confused about what the truth is. It's a Socratic method probing whether or not abstract statements hold true. What's an abstract statement compared to other statements, right? So it's like it's just throwing in a few new words, probing and abstract, and the Socratic method. It's not defined yet, and so on, right? So it's so badly argued. I mean, it's almost like I have to say, don't read this book, because you only be more confused afterwards, and you might fall into the trap of saying, I'm just going to accept what this guy says, right? And then there's a couple of, I don't remember quite exactly what was talked about, but let's see if I can figure it out while I read it again, right? The philosopher makes the moral case for a just war, if such a case can indeed be made. The sophist tells you that you will die if war is not started. Yeah, the philosopher patiently makes the case through reason and evidence. The sophist appeals to fear, anger, horror, and sentimentality in order to thread. I think I went quite deep into explaining this, that philosophy is basically your personal thinking about how you think, or how your experience work, and how you handle it, and your emotions, and all these things that's going on sort of in you, right? So settling all this before you start to argue is actually a good idea, because you can't argue about something that you haven't fully grasped, right? So it's a good idea not to think of philosophy as somebody who goes around telling people whether or not we should go to wars. And that's bullshit, right? Philosophy is about thinking. Know yourself, like Socrates said, right? Get a grip on how you work yourself, and figure out how things work together, right? That's why, so the metaphysics, epistemology, and so on, and do it in a first principle manner, where all the arguments about how this works hangs together, right? There shouldn't be some part of your philosophy that sticks in one direction and looks completely ridiculous, while the rest seems to hang together, right? Everything has to hang together, and it also has to be explained. If you want to explain them, this is how I see it. When you get to that point, it should be something that is sort of intuitive, in a way, you could say, right? But like when I say, if I make a proposition and you have the same experience that proposition is referring to, like elephant, you can say if it's true or false. It's quite easy, right? It's not too deep. No, it's not like, yeah. You might have to do your own kind of philosophy whether to check whether I'm just being too simplistic or something like that, right? And that's why I'm saying, but if all my other arguments hangs together in a long line of first principles, right, then it sort of makes sense. If one takes the other, takes the next, and so on, it comes naturally. It keeps flowing in a sort of steady flow of reasonable arguments of philosophy. But something like this, the Socratic method, is a way of probing abstract statements, particularly about morality, in order to determine if they hold true under most reasonable circumstances. It has to be deconstructed to have even a remote chance of understanding, and then you still have to interpret the meaning of the words and so on, right? So it's more confusing than enlightening, right? Okay, so you can have a look at these yourself in the book if you want. So I'm just heading on to the next quote that I highlighted. Okay. Then there's this one under ostracism versus punishment. The philosopher will studiously avoid privately engaging with anti-rational individuals in the same way that he avoids doing business with a known counterfeiter. Well, anti-rational, I'm not sure I understand what he really means by anti-rational. As I pointed out when I expressed it earlier, that what I feel is lying under this is sort of an agenda that he just labels people he don't want to attack or sort of criticize his philosophy as anti-rational individuals who's out to get him, or just, they just want to crawl in and destroy, sort of, right? So then he can get, that way he has a sophist trick of how to get rid of criticism, so he can keep his business model, right? So I don't know what anti-rational individual, in my idea of rationality, is that rationality is your thinking about that which is valuable to you, right? It's rational for me to reason about how to get food, right? So what does he mean if what would it mean if I talked about anti-rational in this context, or in this sense, understanding of the term rational. Well, would it be that, okay, I'm hungry, but I'm going to be anti-rational and pretend I'm not hungry, right? Nobody does that, right? Nobody does that. Nobody in the right mind, at least, does that, right? And we're talking about, normally functioning people who can, reason decently, right? I'm not saying that there's sort of a group of people who can't reason. Everybody can reason. Absolutely. But there's some who has a sort of have been hit on the head by a stack of bricks or something, an accident or birth defect or whatever they call, right? They may not be able to reason in a sort of average level as most people can, right? But they reason from that point of view, you could say, right? So it's not like you are having trouble reasoning without being. What he's possibly referring to is people being influenced by the fear of those in power, right? And they have been trained and groomed and manipulated and abused into being the flying monkeys for the psychopaths in power, so to say, right? So if that's what he means by anti-rational, I can, walk a little in that direction, right? But I don't like this labeling of people. These are anti-rational, done, right? It's more nuanced than that, right? These clear-cut delineations. I'm here over here with all the rational people, and they are the anti-rational, right? It's just more black and white than it has to be, in my opinion, right? If you reject reason, you waste a philosopher's time. Okay, so this is another way of saying, well, if I don't like what you're saying, he will sort of label people as, okay, you are one of the anti-rationals, you are rejecting reason, so I have to just kick you off my show, or I don't have to listen to your critique, right? And something like what he did with rationality rules when they debated UPB last year, right? So it's sort of this sophist attempt at finding excuses for why any kind of reasonable criticism of his philosophy should be rejected, right? And it's sort of he's sort of grooming his listeners and his readers into conforming to these sophist tricks he's using, right? Okay. And then there was this one: when the sophist sharks attack the innocent, the moral in general, people often back away for fear of being bitten in the same way. This momentary appeasement may save the day, but loses the future. It merely reinforces the successful social strategy of attacking someone whose integrity caused you to humiliate yourself. You may save yourself in the moment, but the sharks only grow stronger and breed. I'm not quite sure exactly what my point was about this. It's maybe a slightly out of context now, but there is this, I'll just pretend that I can't see, right? And then the next time there's a larger chunk, you have to pretend that you can't see and just, look the other way and pretend you can't see anything. It's getting harder and harder and harder to be in the camp of, I didn't see anything happen, right? Now in Australia, people are fucking getting attacked by police in the street for not wearing a mask or anything like that. 5 policemen jumping on people and almost breaking their body, and two policemen blasting a pepper spray into the face of elderly ladies. And it at some point you can no longer pretend not to see what is going on, right? You can no longer use the term, but they deserve it because they didn't do what they were told, right? These excuses and lack of adherence to a moral principle will go up in smoke at some point when they come to get them also, right? So, okay. Then there was the argument and enforcement. And quote here: the primary job of the philosopher is to make social rules rational and comprehensible. Now, I want to stress, I don't like that one, right? I'm strongly opposing that. A philosopher does not have any inherent jobs. That it's not like you are a self-appointed philosopher, and because you have the label philosopher, now you can go around and make social rules rational and comprehensible, right? Now I sound like an Indian. You're walking down my street. I don't want to come here to talk with you, you philosopher guy. Piss off, you. Okay, my pidgin English is not top notch, right? Okay, but there's no primary job. There are no secondary jobs either. Philosopher is not a job. It's not a job. All these academic philosophers, they're just pretending to be some kind of authority. Philosophy is not a kind of authority. It's a kind of thinking about your own thinking. Everyone can do it. They don't need an education, right? It's bullshit. So then there's no primary job, right? You're not being appointed to anything, Stefan Molyneux, right? You're just sitting in your living room trying to convince people that you're this great guy who can save the world. Bullshit, right? Social rules, rational, comprehensible. I mean, I'm feverishly rejecting this. Social rules, rational. How can you make it rational? If the fork is on this side and the knife is on this side, what can you make that rational? What if you're left-handed and you have one arm, or and comprehensible? Bullshit, right? No, if there's any job the philosopher has, it is to figure out his own philosophy and get to the deepest depth of thinking in order to make sense of how you think, and maybe adjust your thinking, your normal everyday thinking, based on your philosophical thinking, right? And when you have done that, and in the end figure out the perfect moral principle, then you can get out on the street and say, well, I don't think this is a good rule you have over here, because so and so and so and so and so, my definition of truth, my definition of knowledge, my definition of ethics, and so on, right? Make social rules rational, comprehensible. Sort off, man. Okay, then there was who are arguments for? Okay, and then we reach the end with the next chapter, which is the audience. We are just about 3/5 away through the book. So I must admit, I'm getting a little tired of this, plain language philosophy here, right? I want to have something more cohesive and something that I can grasp without having to deconstruct too much text. So I'm hoping that we are getting into something that is more comprehensible and directly understandable in a philosophical sense than this we have dealt with in the recent chapters. Okay, let's see how it goes. Now we approach one of the most fundamental questions of the argument. Who is its intended audience? The simple answer is, of course, everyone. Everyone benefits from the argument, even if they don't participate in the argument. Even if you just passively listen to an argument, your mind is improved, your mental health is enhanced, and your ability to reason is advanced through exposure. Really? Really? That's a bit of a claim, I would say, right? Yeah. We all suffer from confirmation bias. How do you know? And the word suffer itself is a kind of confirmation bias, since confirmation bias is what enables continuity in culture and moral standards and social rules. Each of us is invested in our belief systems, just as we are invested in our children, our marriages, and our careers. We should not give them up lightly. Confirmation bias is the wall that protects hard-won and long-lasting social values. It is the immune system that helps protect values from sophistry. Naturally, confirmation bias has its own well-known dark side, but it is important to remember the case for confirmation bias as well. When you are right, confirmation bias is a virtue. Those willing to subjugate their egos to to reality know the benefits of the argument and do not need to the threat of punishment or the bribery of approval to pursue the rewards of rigorous rational verbal combat. Those unwilling to subjugate their egos to reality do not benefit from the argument. It hardens their belief systems into irrational dogma. They need a stick rather than a carrot to conform to requirements of the argument. Think of a tennis game. Watching an expert tennis player gives average tennis players something to aim for and also helps maintain their humility. Whenever we apply ourselves to a particular task, we are all experts relative to yesterday. Merely looking behind us at our wake makes us feel that we have achieved more than we have. Looking ahead to those with a true mastery of the task reminds us how far we have to go, which can be painful but also spurs ambition and dedication. What attitude should expert tennis players have towards those who with no desire to play by the rules? Well, there's no attitude anybody should have, right? Then it's not an attitude. Then it's a commandment by some third party or something like that. If you want 3 serves instead of 2, or to win a tie in a game by 1 point instead of 2, or to demand the expanded lines of doubles court for a single match, how should an expert tennis player respond? There's no particular way an expert tennis player should respond, or any other. There's no. If this is the case, then this must happen, or should happen, or you must do this, right? There aren't any of those. And here, inevitably, we return to the issue of ostracism. Expert tennis players know that if you want to play tennis, you have to play by the rules. Well, yes, because playing tennis is the same as saying I'm playing according to these rules. Tennis is a set of rules. If I'm playing tennis, I'm according to these rules. But it doesn't mean that if I have a rack, what's it called? Tennis, what is it called? Tennis rack? Bat? Oh, not a bat. I forget what is the English name is. Racket. Tennis racket, right? In my hand, and I smash it into a so-called tennis ball. Am I playing tennis? Well, it's sort of this gray area thing, right? So it's just about if we start this game, we are saying, okay, we could start with by saying, okay, are we following these rules? Do we want to adjust the rules? Well, we're adjusting the rules this way. Fine, we agree, and then we carry on. If somebody is sort of breaking the rules under the game, then you can refer back and say, no, you said you were going to follow these rules, right? You're breaking the rule that we agreed on, right? So you can say, okay, if we're going to continue, you have to go back to the rules. Otherwise, we're stopping the game right here. It's so fucking simple, really, right? So, man, I guess it's a decent example, but yeah. But there is no rules that is handed down from God. These are the rules you follow by tennis, right? It's also some sort of incremental change of, right? These are the rules, right? And you can change them if you want. And if you want to change them by yourself, well, you're maybe not going to get to play tennis if you can't convince your opponent, right? Or the other guy or the other person's playing tennis with you, right? So it's all about negotiations. Of course, seeing when the ball is out of bounds is far easier than, get away from these. In the same way, if you want to cheat at the argument and an expert debater no longer wants an expert debater, what is that? Is that Stefan Molyneux? Huh? He's, of course, an expert debater. No longer wants to argue with you. Your fragile ego will probably lash out, claiming victory, taunting weakness on the part of your former opponent, and crowing that all who wish to avoid you have in fact been defeated by you. To the uneducated masses, this strategy may work. Another reason why I wrote this book. Okay, so he's not saying it outright, but you have to agree or conclude that he considers himself an expert debater, and therefore he can tell you whether or not you are debating correctly. And he's going to be the one who's saying, okay, I know how to debate, and you're not doing it rightly because you're saying something that is critical to my philosophy. Therefore, you are a bad debater, and you should be kicked out of this forum, right? This is what is really going on, right? If we wish to maintain the rules of tennis or chess or debates or civilization, experts must ostracize those who refuse to play by the experts, right? Oh, experts. Isn't that the philosopher kings of old, right? Is it Plato's Republic we are talking about here? Rejecting incompetence in any structured interaction. Incompetence is in fact anti-competence. Is essential to maintaining basic civilized standards. So now, he's pointing out there's some stupid people over there. So we need some experts to take care of all these stupid people that can't, they can't handle this. You can't handle the truth. Right? I'm an expert debater, and I'm an expert. I must ostracize those who refuse to play by the rules, right? There are rules, and you need to follow them. And I'm an expert, so I'm, enforcing rules, right? If we want to maintain a civilization, we must defend the argument at all costs. Well, I don't want to maintain a civilization because it's an artificial construct. It can't be maintained because it is not there. And you should understand that. You're manipulating, you're a sophist, right? You are actually doing that which you claim is bad to do, referring to something as if it exists, and what it doesn't exist. And then you're saying, I'm a spokesperson, I'm an expert who must defend this civilization, right? You are actually violating your foundational axioms in this book, right? And I'm even hesitating to calling it axioms, but that was one of the clear ones early in the book. Am I finding until we take the next step of this at part 12? This is bullshit, right? It's so freaking bullshit, and this is dangerous talk. This is authoritarian bullshit, that he should be one of those who was sitting in the in the council judging people whether or not they play by the rules or not, and God knows what will happen to those who don't comply, right? Fuck off. The incompetent will naturally rail against the supposed injustice and intolerance of this ostracism because they want to play the game with the rules tilted in their favor. While wildly wrong, this is natural. The stakes of controlling the argument are the highest possible in society, and a $1 trillion prize can be understood to carry with it a strong impulse to tilt the playing field. Ostracizing the incompetent from the argument also serves to create two sub-societies within the larger society. Holy shit. The society of those who respect the argument and the society of those who do not. Given that the argument as a whole rests upon empiricism, he's just talking about civilization as it's something that must be protected and so on, right? What is empirical about civilization? What color does civilization have? Does it have a color? Does it have a sound? Does it have a taste? Does it have a feel? Does it have a smell? Right? None of this, right? So what you're talking about is bullshit. It's not empiricism. It's pure, word wizardry. Having these two opposing epistemological methodologies in society can be enormously instructive. Place a conceptual wall between these two opposing camps and see which one does better over time or which does worse. Where reason fails, empiricism instructs, often brutally, but that is why we respect reason as the shield against the ugly blowback of the consequences of rejecting reason. See Venezuela. Okay, so this is dangerous talk, right? This is, now we're getting, he's using philosophy to create the republic, right? He's a sort of a Stefan Molyneux republic, or whatever you want to call it, the state of Molyneux, right? So this is a big one. Okay, fundamentally, the argument has two customers: those who use the argument like a man trying to reach a roof uses a ladder, and those who use the argument like a pickpocket uses the distraction of bumping into you to steal your wallet. The former need no punishment since they use the argument as the primary tool in the pursuit of truth, integrity, virtue. The latter need the punishment of ostracism, just as someone who urinates in your swimming pool needs to find another place to swim. I mean, when you're talking this kind of language, and then you throw in a joke like pissing in a swimming pool, right? It's just, it rubs me the wrong way in so many on so many levels, right? It's almost like he's joking about it, right? It's not like he understands this is very, very, very serious business, right? This is about building a wall, okay? This is building a wall. He's saying we're going to build a wall. On this side, the argument is respected, and on this side, the argument is disrespected, right? And then he's going to point out who those who are not respecting his argument are, and then he'll be the dictator who throw people on the other side of the wall and say, fuck you, right? It's so fucking dangerous and totalitarian. I mean, it may sound like it's sort of, okay, I want to, go over here and leave me the fuck alone, right? I can understand these kind of urges. I have the same kind of mentality to some extent, right? I'm just going to ignore people if they don't want to treat me well, right? As far as I can. But he's not talking about you as an individual, right? You could do this, try to do this, right? No, he has to rally people into this civilization. He has to mobilize. He has to rebel rouse, right? That's what's dangerous. Because if you look at how things went on in Europe in the first half of the 20th century, I talked about earlier that the Russia and Spain and Italy and Germany went into totalitarianism. But the difference between Germany and the other ones were that Nazism was a response to another kind of totalitarianism, which is communism, right? So the fascists or the Nazis were a response to another kind of opposing kind of totalitarianism, right? So the Nazis were those who reacted to some kind of totalitarianism, while the others were just growing out of a, let's say, Christian environment, right? So Christians either, the progressive Christians become communist, and the conservative Christians become Nazis, right? So because we have this overwhelming communist crony capitalism in the Western world, the reactions hopefully should not be some kind of Nazism, right? I mean, I'm not trying to necessarily label people as Nazis, right? But I think that it's just about time we start to pull out the Nazi card, just as we are pulling out the communism card or the fascism card, right? Any kind of card should be pulled anytime you want, because we have to make sure that we don't end up in a fucking third or fourth world war, right? Where, the whole planet is destroyed, anything like that, right? So, and these kind of, this is why this is such a dangerous time, right? This is the point in time when all sorts of people who has sort of lurked in the corners and have a desire to, save the world like a Jesus, right, are going to pop up and tell everybody how things should be. These people are bad over there, these people are good over here, and things like that, right? Things to arguments to that effect. And this is hugely dangerous, right? Even if he has the sort of good intentions. But just like in the Lord of the Rings, right, then, Gandalf says that, no, don't tempt me about this ring of power. Even if I want to do good, it will wield, evil through me, right? In my attempt to do good will end up with Plato's Republic, where people are forced into whatever, we don't need anything of like that, right? We don't need that. We can get freedom by building walls. It's stupid, right? The argument and reality. Okay, this could be interesting. Let's see how long it is. This looks like, and truth afterwards. Oh, yeah. Okay, good thing. Let's see. The argument and reality. Our minds are capable of error. How do you know? Right? How the hell do you know? If you experience an elephant, do you know whether or not you should experience elephant? Excuse me. How would you know? If you suddenly figure out that it wasn't an elephant but a rhino, or that elephant suddenly changes, the concept changes into rhino, does that mean that you know that you shouldn't experience elephant? Right? And now it's a rhino. Okay, now you can say, I can say I'm experiencing rhino. That doesn't mean you should experience rhino. It might change into something third or fourth. How do you know? Well, you don't, because you can't tell about the future, and the past is just a memory, right? You can only say, I experienced this in the now, and I don't know if it's an error or not, right? Just because I have a memory that I used to recognize it as an elephant doesn't mean that I'm sure that now that's it. It's a rhino. How could you? Because you need something to compare to. And you do not have that. You don't have an extra mind over here that is perfect, right? And if you have that extra mind, why wouldn't you use that instead of that, flawed mind you're using in your daily life, right? So it makes no sense when you think about it. Okay, which is the greatest strength and weakness of the human condition? Most organisms react automatically or instinctively to environmental cues. The lion is hungry, it chases the gazelle is frightened, it runs away, the rabbit is horny, it makes more rabbits. This automatic input-output mechanism has little room for error, and thus little room for experimentation and improvement. The human mind has the capacity to rise above and often below mere empirical sense data. Mere? That's all you have? And then your conceptual extractions from that empirical sense data. Okay. Because we can reject the evidence of our direct senses, we get all the glories of science and all the terrors of superstition. The sun and the moon appear the same size to us. We can discover that they are different in reality. The world looks largely flat. We can ascertain that it is not. We also fear the wrath of those long dead, and because their personalities live on in our mind, we imagine them stalking our hallways with wet chains and staring eyes. We gain reason and science by using the direct evidence of our senses to extrapolate and discover general rules, which we can then apply to contradict the direct evidence of our senses. I'll have to see that again. We gain reason and science by using the direct evidence of our senses to extrapolate and discover general rules, which we can then apply to contradict the direct evidence of our senses. Yeah, but we used our senses to figure out that which we use to contradict our direct evidence of our senses. So at some point, you have to accept what you sense in order to find out some tool used to, contradict the direct evidence of your senses. Why didn't you contradict them in the first place? This is an infinite regression. It doesn't work. Right? He can't see these things. He just thinks he's a very clever philosopher. He isn't. The stability and predictability of matter and energy create within us the capacity for empirical rationality. Empirical rationality. How many different kinds of rationality has he mentioned until now? I might do a search on rationality and see how many ways he tries to attach this. I'll mark this blue. In other words, concepts are valid because atoms and physical laws exist. But, oh my God, atoms are concepts, right? Physical laws are abstractions, generalized abstractions. You can't use those because they are based on understanding concepts. These are circular arguments. Don't you understand that? God damn. Water exists because the atomic aggregation of H2O, the two has to be below, not up. So just I'm educated in chemistry, so the two has to be down here, Mr. Molyneux. Has stable properties, and you are not following the rules of chemistry, right? I think I have to ostracize you. You are not following the rules of chemistry, chemical notation, right? You're bad. I'm building a wall soon if you don't comply and put the two down here, follow the rules of chemistry, right? Okay, got it? Water below 0 degrees Celsius turns into ice because it possesses stable properties and characteristics. No, you babbling fool. 0 degrees is defined as that point where water turns into ice. Right? That's what is defined. A degree Celsius is a hundredth of the temperature difference between the boiling point and the freezing point of water. That's the definition of a Celsius degree, right? A degree Celsius. Water below turns into ice because maybe it's not that I meant a bit on a tangent there. Okay. Turns into ice because it possesses stable properties and characteristics. Yeah, but that doesn't explain anything, right? It doesn't. You're just observing how things happen, define the temperature level, and then you say it's because there's a properties and characteristics. Well, it doesn't explain anything. Okay, let's head on. Our most abstract concepts are built on the properties of invisible rules and atoms, just as the glow of a city is visible from space while its inhabitants are not. Our capacity to extract and conceptualize physical properties into conceptual patterns is unique in the animal kingdom. I think I have to mark this one where he makes a circular argument. Okay, reason is our codification of rules found in nature. Aristotle's 3 laws of logic directly correspond to the kind of sense perception worked through by every growing baby. An object is itself and nothing else. No. Oh, no. An object is itself and nothing else. I'm not any wiser, right? An object is either itself or something else. But that's nonsense to me, right? It's either itself, but if it's not itself, it's something else. But why do you call itself? If an X is an X, well, you can do that with everything. So you're not saying anything, and you're saying it's just something else. Well, what is something else? What is that? Is that a Y? Then it's just a placeholder for an X, which is a placeholder for an object you haven't defined yet. I don't buy this kind of circular logical statements. I don't buy it. And then there's an object must be either itself or something else. Isn't that the same that he's just said? Oh, sorry. An object is itself and nothing else. An object is either itself or something else. An object must be either itself or something else. Oh my God. What is it doing? An object is itself and nothing else. An object is either itself or something else. But I can't make sense of it. I mean, I can't. I mean, this is confusing on another level, right? He's deliberately confusing people to sound wise, right? A ball is a ball. Oh, well, of course, it's tautological, right? Or it's circular. It's like saying the premise is this is a ball, therefore the conclusion is it's a ball, right? It's stupid deduction. A ball is either a ball or something else. No, it can't be something else if it's a ball. If it's not a ball, you can't say that it's a ball, either a ball or something else. It can't be both. It can't be a ball or something else. If it's a ball, it's a ball. Done, right? It can't be something else then, right? Then you can't say it's a ball. You are saying a ball is either a ball or something else. No, you just say this is a ball. Okay. And afterwards, when you look at that ball, you say either it's a ball or it's something else. That's so stupid. I mean, I can't even understand he's writing something like that, right? An object must be either a ball or something else. Oh my God. This is a description of stable physical properties over time. Oh my God. What is this? Is a rewriting of Aristotle's three laws of logic. But logic is some kind of description of your experience of whatever, right? You having an experience of some external world doesn't mean that your experience or the description of your experience being predictable or stable or whatever you want to call it is the same as that which the experience is based upon must also be stable, right? If it is at all based on anything, right? I'm not trying to be a solipsist here, but you have to start from some point, right? So this is because it was a ball yesterday and it's a ball now. It has to be a ball for all eternity. Well, the bullshit, right? You can't claim that. You are stretching your abilities to claim stability and knowledge insights beyond what you are capable of from your empirical limitations, right? So while claiming empirical rationality, he is violating empiricism left and right here, right? Just as Aristotle are, right? So I don't buy any of this self-contradictory statements about rationality and empiricism, and then proceed to say this is stable all through time and space, right? Without having empirical access to that, because it's impossible, right? Empiricism must be in the now. Otherwise, the past is a memory and the future is an imagination. So it's just word babbling once again, right? This is a description of stable physical properties over time. A ball roamed behind the couch does not suddenly become part of the couch. Well, how do you know? If you can't experience it, how do you know what it does? It's out of your empiricism, right? This is the development of object constancy. Yeah, but that's an inference. That's an inference. That is induction into the future, that this object is going to be where I predict it to be, right? But you can't know that before you go behind the couch and look at that ball, right? And see if it has become part of the sofa, right? It's very unlikely it's becoming a part of the sofa, but you cannot know it before you have the empirical data, right? Why can't you see this? Why is this so difficult to see? You are talking about this great level of insight called empiricism, and then you proceed to violate it in the next sentence. You reach behind the couch to get the ball, which is still there. Toddlers will reach into a glass of water to retrieve the ball dropped therein. They will not reach in to retrieve milk that is poured into the same glass of water because they understand that milk has been mixed into the water and cannot be retrieved. The stable, consistent, and predictable behavior of matter and energy. But matter and energy are concepts attempting to describe reality, right? And since you can describe them, they have some predictability. Otherwise, it would be pointless trying to describe it if they disappeared, right? And never were not to be seen again, right? So yes, but it doesn't prove anything from an epistemological point of view. As I said, you have to, if you have the axiom or the first principle or one of your first principles or axioms called empiricism, well, then you have to have empirical sense data in the now to make any kind of claim of that object you're referring to. Necessary for us to say anything valid about reality. There is no such thing as a cold candle flame. How do you know? How do you know? Right? It's like saying there is no, in 400 years ago, there is no such thing as a black swan, right? There is no such thing as a black swan. So some guy travels across the world, and on the other side of what he calls a globe, he finds a black swan. Okay, so there are black swans, right? How do you know? Well, you don't, right? Because you can't know. Thus, if I say that candle flames are cold to the touch, I'm incorrect. Candle flames, but you haven't experienced all possible candle flames in the world. You are just inducing what you have experienced so far and what you have heard here and there and read in books and so on, and saying, okay, I'm going to, claim that no flames anywhere possible in the whole universe, right, can be any other than what I'm claiming. But you do not have empirical sense data to justify that claim. It's a claim, but you do not have the knowledge yet, right? That's why people find something like black swans. If I have a scientific hypothesis that requires a candle flame to be cold to the touch, there's no point testing it because my initial premise is anti-empirical. Well, 30 years ago, there weren't mobile phones, right? But if you get your mind to it, maybe you could develop a flame that was cold to touch. I wouldn't rule that out. It's just about get your head together, and some other people get your heads together and try to figure it out. Right? I don't see why it must. And cold is a relative term, right? It's cold compared to something else that is warmer, right? So it's not something it is. You are making a comparison. It's a relative term. A relative term cannot be an attribute of an object, right? Cold is not an attribute. Cold is a comparison between possibly this object and some other object who has a different kind of attribute, right? Or a different degree of that said attribute. Temperature, you could maybe call it, right? Okay. If I have a scientific hypothesis that requires candle flames to be simultaneously both cold and hot to touch, I don't need to know anything about candle flames to reject the hypothesis. No, but that's another thing. It's a contradictory, right? It can't both be the thing and the opposite. If we accept that cold and hot are opposite, you could agree whether or not they really are opposite, but they can't be, to the best of my knowledge, at the same moment, both 100 degrees and 0 degrees, right? It's either or. It takes some time to get from one to the other, right? It's not possible for all. But I'm not ruling out that it doesn't seem to be possible, right? And if you're saying, okay, I can't rule out that it's completely, I can't rule out that, I can't say that it's completely impossible, but I would have very, very, very big trouble figuring out how to do that, right? So I would reject that idea outright. That's fine, right? Because it is self-contradictory in its inception. In the same way, if I start an argument by stating that for my conclusion to be true, gravity must both attract and repel matter simultaneously, no testing or further analysis is required. My theory contradicts itself at its roots and can be dismissed without further inquiry. This works equally well with concepts. There is no such thing as a square circle. And if my argument requires the existence of such a self-contradictory concept, it can be, well, we have to talk about existence and concepts, right? Concepts are not existence, because they are part of your mind, right? They are a reference to a collection of certain experiential qualia that ignites a concept in your mind, and then you say, okay, now there's an elephant in my experience, but the mind adds the concept. So you can say that the concept is the existence, but the concept is the generalized, the induced object. It's the induction of some kind. The concept is what the mind makes when it makes induction, right? It induces the concept called banana, for instance, right? And it has all sort of attributes. That might change over time, but they have a set of attributes. And that's the concept. But that doesn't exist, right? It's only when you have a cognition of something in your experience where you say, aha, that's a banana. Then you have existence, right? Existence, right? It's something outside. Concepts is that inside yourself that recognizes that existence. So a concept can't exist. This is the old problem way back to Plato, right? And Socrates. This is why the argument first requires logical consistency and only then empirical verification. This requirement exists because the argument attempts to say something valid and true about rational empirical reality. No, an argument doesn't say anything. The one saying something is the one producing the argument. Take responsibility for your arguments. You can't float in the air, right? Somebody has to make it, present it, or express it. About rational empirical reality, and thus must conform to the requirements of truth. Oh, truth. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the argument in truth. There it is. And we're going to discuss this one and deconstruct this one. We are going to discuss and deconstruct this one in the next part. See you there.